What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Rails of Mass. Today's adventure is going to begin right where the previous one ended, right here in Dover Center. With the exception of the Dunkin' Donuts being added here at the depot, and the rails being removed, not much has changed here over the past decades. And I honestly think it will continue to look like this for many years to come. Thankfully, we only lost a small section of rail here in the center, and it's intact all the way until the next crossing, about 2 miles away. But before we take a look at that, we're going to take another quick look back in time at the way it was before we continue down the line. It's now May of 1985, and Bay Colony Railroad 1061 is approaching the crossing here at Dedham Street. At this point, it's only been about 3 years since Bay Colony took over the line from Conrail. The crossing system is no longer active here, so the crew has to stop and protect the crossing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're now at the Springdale Ave crossing. The rail's intact from here for about the next 2 miles until the next road crossing. Moving over to our right, we're now on Hawthorne Lane. This street was constructed in 2011 and was not present when the last train went through here. Switching to an area view gives you a better idea of the layout here. Alright, now it's time to come back down to ground level and be on our way. I quickly realized this section of line was more overgrown than I thought it was. And we elected to put the drone away for this little part of the adventure, and we're going to go in with the gimbal. It's a lot of ducking and weaving around the branches as we first get in here, but after a little bit it starts to open up. A look back at this timetable from 1985 shows we're about 3 miles from where we started our adventure from Medfield Junction. A look at page 14 on the timetable shows us that we had crossing protection still installed to the remaining crossings all the way back to Medfield Junction in 1985. Although a look at note C will show us that all of them have been deactivated at this time. If you're wondering about that note C, it reads as follows. Automatic crossing protection of this crossing has been deactivated. Trains or engines must stop before passing over this crossing, and a member of the crew must protect the crossing and stop all highway traffic in advance of each movement. It's currently December of 2025 and Christmas is quickly approaching, but we still have reminders of Halloween here on the line. As we continue further down the line, I want to take a moment to acknowledge some of your comments. As I said before, it's been a lot of fun making this series. I've read every single comment, I've responded to as many as I could, and just really your experiences, your memories, and your opinions here that really make this series amazing. Now, this comment here in particular, I spent quite some time staring at, and it made me really think about where I'm going to take this series, what my plans are going forward, and where we are going to end up here. You know, this line had many lives, and many lives had many distances, starting points, endpoints, and it all depends on what railroad you're looking at and what time period you're looking at to decide where's the real beginning, where's the end. But from the Bay Colony period, we kind of started in the middle actually at Needham Junction. And I've had some regrets about that, but we're going to continue moving forward to Medfield Junction, and that is our plan at this time. Although in this episode we will only be covering the rest of the town of Dover. At this time, I have recorded the rest of the way to Medfield Junction and beyond into the town of Mellis. As we've continued getting further away from Needham Junction, the remaining portion of the line in Needham and Newton that I left out from the beginning of the series, I've always wondered how I was going to tie that back in, and now I think I finally have a plan for that. So moving forward in this series, we're going to make our way to Medfield Junction, and we're actually going to backtrack to Needham Junction where we began and work our way the other way, back to Newton.
Although so far we have continued in order, I promise there will be some one-off episodes. Massachusetts is a state with a lot of abandoned railroad infrastructure, so this series is going to be continuing to many different places. You really never know where we're going to end up next, but we'll worry about that in a future episode. The goal here is just to document as much as possible, because like we said in my last episode, nothing lasts forever. Now with that out of the way, let's get back to Dover. In our last episode, a lot of you seemed to have interest in the idea of putting a trail here, and we're going to talk more about that today. In 2024, the town of Dover received a $184,000 Mass Trail Grant. This grant would be used for the design, engineering, and permitting of a potential recreational trail, connecting the town of Needham with the town of Medfield. While I personally doubt this project will move forward, I want to address another comment here, and that's this one here in particular. In some cases, rail trails seem to provide questionable people with easy and non-policeable access to high-priced real estate. Now, while I have heard this argument brought up before, as someone that lives close to the Big Colony Rail Trail in Needham, I can tell you it's not an issue on our end over here. And just if you take a look around at the area right here, you'll see there's not many houses, there's not many backyards. Looking at this section of the line in particular, that house down there on the left is the last house you're going to see for about the next mile and a half. Dover is very much a small town. A place of about 5 police cars, 1 traffic light, 1 gas station, 1 little store. And the new Dunkin' Donuts now occupying the former Dover Depot, probably being the biggest convenience in town. In the center of town you also find one other place to eat, and I mean only one, and I wouldn't recommend it either. The residents here just want to coexist with each other, and have no outsiders in here. And I can understand that in a way. But, you know, it is what it is. Now, the reason I believe Dover will never see a trail is for the same reason Dover has no bus and no train. They simply don't want it. It brings people from outside of Dover into Dover. And that's not something that's very appreciated here. Although I would personally use the trail if it was built here. I personally would rather see the rails just stay as they are if they're not going to be used. I don't believe in any rail line being ripped up. Regardless of whether or not the rail stays, I thought it was important to still make this adventure here. Because whether it fills in with brush and becomes unwalkable one day, or it does get torn up, it's not going to look like this forever. So it's important to take one last look at how it looks now. As of the time of recording in December 2025, there's been no activity on this project in the past 10 months from what I can see. And I honestly don't see it going any further, but I still thought it was worth talking about. Although this line is slowly being reclaimed by nature, the rail still is in pretty good shape, all things considered. I truly believe with a good brush cutting and some ties, we could probably run a train here again. Despite Mother Nature taking back over, the line really doesn't look all that different from when the last train passed through here. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to be curious about where the timetable information you just looked at came from. And that came from here, the Bay Colony Railroad Timetable Number 5, effective May 22nd, 1987. The timetable has everything from maps to diagrams and instructions, and we'll be looking back at it several times later in this series. If you'd like to take a deeper look at the timetable, I posted a full copy on the Rails and Mass Facebook page. I'll put a link in the description of this video. There's honestly not a lot to see in this section of track right here, so we're going to use the power of fast forward. Now, I wish this fast forwarding option was here when I was actually recording in person. It was bitterly cold when I recorded this video, and it's about 2 miles between crossings. The roadbed here is pretty flat compared to the surrounding terrain, and for the most part we've been on higher ground since we left Dover Center. But moving forward, we're about to come into the first rock cut, and the terrain is going to change pretty drastically. When I originally came to record this episode, I almost left this part out, but later felt guilty and came back to record it. While sometimes it is interesting to see these areas from above, you're not going to get a real feel for it unless you get down in here. We're now back to normal speed, and as you can see the terrain's beginning to change a bit here. We're now entering the first rock cut. It really reminds me a lot of how Needham used to be before our trail was put in. A lot of men put in a lot of work to clear this rock to get this railroad in here. This was actually my first look at this section of the line. The walk out here really was quite peaceful. We are really in the middle of nowhere. While we didn't encounter a Dover demon on this trip, we encountered one person walking back, and not a single person on my way out. It really is a bit of a distance between here and the nearest house. It's only a short distance before we're entering the next rock cut. It's crazy to realize it's been nearly 18 years since the last freight train passed through here. And it's been nearly 58 years since the last passenger train. As we come deeper into the rock cut, it just shows how much work actually had to take place here to make this railroad happen. It's from this point we're going to be going back to our wonderful fast forward feature. Although there's not really a need for it now, I would love to see passenger service restored to this line. At the time it was cut, it was in the early years of the MBTA. Money was tight, and a lot of things had to go. I can only imagine if things were different. It's also a shame that this line was severed before it could become part of the Mass Coastal system. The remaining 0.1 miles from Medfield Junction are still part of Mass Coastal now, but there's not really a use for that. I know a lot of you would say it's unrealistic, but I still think it's nice to think about what could have been. With the rest of the right-of-way looking pretty similar for the rest of our journey to the next crossing, we're going to switch to an above view. Emerging from the wilderness, we're now approaching the last road crossing in the town of Dover, Hunt Drive. Coming back down to street level, we can see that the rails here have been removed like the other crossings. This is actually the final missing section of rail in town. Now, with the exception of the rails being removed in the crossing here, it really doesn't look all that different from when the last train passed through here. But what it does look different than is when this train passed through here 40 years ago. So if you've been following along, that's the same thing we just saw back in Dover Center. Now that we're done looking around here, let's continue on down the line. We don't have a lot more track to cover today. Despite the fact that the trees are taking over here, the rail's still in pretty good shape here, all things considered. We don't make it far up the line before we find our next point of interest, this old crossing. And just another few feet away, we also find this small bridge. Like many other crossings, heavier rail was installed here. And of course, we gotta take a look at the small bridge before we move on. Just a short distance ahead, we find ourselves arriving at the town line at Medfield. Medfield section of this line is almost entirely rail to trail, but the very end of it is still just rail, with that last 0.1 miles becoming part of the Mass Coastal System. From here we get a look at just how small this rail really is. Very lightweight compared to what you see on today's main lines. Now that we've made it to the town line, our adventure ends here. But I hope you'll join me back here next time as we make our way to Medfield Junction and beyond. Until next time, I'm your host Steve Hurley. Thanks for watching.